This is the Dallas Morning News. This episode is from an independent podcast hosted by the Dallas Morning News opinion team.
Kyle, John Wiley Price is about as complex an individual as you find. There are a lot of folks that love him and a lot of folks that hate him, and he's never short on opinion.
Well, we ran through a ton of topics, Tom, from education to healthcare to criminal justice and everything in between. He was an incredibly engaging guest, and he told a lot of stories.
There are a lot of things that I disagree with, but I'll tell you, you won't find anybody that's got as much passion for what he's doing and also knowledgeable. His knowledge on jails, hospitals, those sorts of things is very deep. It's a very interesting and educational time.
Well, when you serve for 41 years on the Commissioner Court, I don't know who else has done that, especially in Texas or in the nation, but when you do that, you've got a knowledge base that's second to none. So excited to listen.
This is a good listen, even if you disagree.
Totally, 100%. Tune in. Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, you want to introduce our guest?
Commissioner John Wiley Price with us. Commissioner, it's great to have you.
Well, it's good to be here because I don't usually get invited too many places, and I definitely don't usually get invited back. But so I'm just glad to be here today.
Well, we appreciate you being here. You have been a commissioner, Dallas County, for 40 years.
41 to be exact.
To be exact. That's the longest in North Texas, probably the longest in Texas, and maybe one of the longest in the nation in terms of elected public officials' continuous service. After 40 years, is it still as satisfying? Is it still as productive? Is it still as fun as it was?
It's still as challenging. I take biblical privilege here that 40 is the magic number in the Bible, whether it's in the wilderness, 40 days and 40 nights. 40 is the magic number. So I think I'm just now beginning to probably live out, as Zan Holmes would say, my mission. He said everybody can tell you when they were born, but can they tell you why? And at 41, old black people had a prayer, and I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now. They say, I woke up this morning, I was clothed in my right mind, and I had a reasonable portion of health and strength and the reasonable activity of my limbs. And so if I wake up, I'm still in the will, and I'm trying not to get in God's way. And at the end of the day, I'm ready to go. It's just that simple. So, no, I'm still on mission, and there are still a number of things. And the more I think, Mayor, that I have accomplished, whether I measure myself at funerals or just in life every day, I know it's real difficult for people to understand. But I'm a lot more spiritual than most people think. My dad was a Baptist minister. My son's a minister. And the Lord skipped me, but he's working on me. So I understand. But my mother said every time the church door opens, I need to be there, and I try to be there. But I'm real clear about where I'm going, why I'm here, and has nothing to do with me. Nothing whatsoever. So I'm okay.
Good thing to remember.
Commissioner for 40 years. I'm 31. So you've got 10 years now, I guess 41 to be exact.
Don't take it personal. He throws that at me all the time, too. So don't take it personal.
Hey, nothing personal.
I'm the young guy here.
Yeah.
So you're known as our man downtown. Give us a history of that. Where did that start? How did that come to be? And what does it mean to you?
Well, it started 40 years ago as I was out in the community knocking doors. And they said, well, what is a commissioner? And I said, well, I went through all that whole constitutional jargon. And then they said, well, what does that mean? You're going to be responsible for the streets? I said, yeah, but not really in the cities, in areas that the cities don't want. And so I was trying to explain. They said, well, still don't understand. I said, but I'm going to be your man, and I'm going to be downtown. And it just kind of stuck. And it's been there. And that I try to live that out every day. And it doesn't matter about county work. if it's city, if it's school work, it doesn't matter. My constituents have a difficult time navigating public sector anyway. So if it's about schools and I tell my staff, we need to answer. Regardless, I am the guy that sits there to try to help navigate my constituency, of which in Dallas County, 2.8 million people, have about 700,000. So 70%, 955 square miles, Dallas County, and I've got 16 of the 31 cities. I've got to 68 square miles of unincorporated lands that no city wants. I've got probably all of the real growth development area that, industrial area that's south. And so it's a challenge, but it's one that I welcome. It's difficult for people. You talk about intersections. It's difficult for people to understand that the things that most people take for granted, we're still having a difficult time. Yes, I want industry to come, but I've got something basic called infrastructure. And that has not just to do with roads and bridges. It has everything to do with water. Finally, in 2008, the state legislature gave me the authority, or gave commissions the authority to, within the right-of-way of thoroughfare projects, we could do some infrastructure. But for that, most of my cities had not seen water and sewer except what we call pass-through. I mean, there's only a couple of ways you really get water infrastructure here. You either go through DWU, which owns, Lake Ray Hubbard, or you go through TRA, Trinity River Authority. And so a lot of my cities were doing pass-throughs. I've got cities that buy 40 million gallons of water a day. I've got cities that buy 22 million gallons of water a day. But I just needed to buy 3 million gallons of water. You got to get permission from DWU, even though my city is paying for that 40 million gallon. But then once I got that permission, now I've got to go and I've got to build a 2 million gallon underground storage tank. I've got to build a 500 gallon above ground. I've got to build a pump station. And so it becomes a real challenge to try to mediate all of this. Plus the politics of some of my communities is still fairly strained. And I won't say it's all Hatfield and McCoy's, but it's real close. And just when you think it's okay to come out, and all of a sudden something by 1 or 2 votes changes all the dynamics. So
clearly you're known for your commitment to the community, but you've also been, on a national basis, one of the real leaders of civil rights, but you've translated that in opportunities. We worked for a long time on minority contracting, providing opportunities and that sort of thing. Over the course of the last 10 years, have we made progress?
Mayor, it has been marginal progress. You've got to put it all in perspective. The Dallas-Fort Worth area does about almost $500 billion. When you look at TxDOT, when you look at all I'm just talking about public sector, the ISDs, when you look at what goes on with the transit, when you look at the county, the hospitals, Dallas College, you got over $500 billion. So how does that basically meet out in terms of real opportunity? Yeah, there's been some, it's measured. And just DFW alone, the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, when you look at what goes on there, Dallas College has $1 billion, DISD has $1 billion, here's Parkland, here's the county, and so when you look at that, it becomes measured. So yes, I've got a lot of engineers. I'm doing water projects now. Water flows south. People, I tease my colleagues. I said, no, water does not flow north. It flows south. So I went after some grants on the Texas Water Development Board. And in that assembly, of course, I had cities that hadn't been mapped in years, just basic tributaries, the kind of things that most people don't think about. But I had a number of engineers who were capable of doing it. And APM but in charge of the program. Half an associate's been around forever. They're great, but you keep using the same people. The APMs of the world never get a chance to show that, that they're bridge specialists, that they're hydro engineers, that they know how to map and do all of this. So, yes, we've made some progress. Now, that's on the design side. The engineer, when I talk about coming through the canyon, downtown, that's $900 million. That's before we go south in the Gateway, 67. But that's TxDOT. Well, and that's before you get to where the convention center is. My point is that at one time, TxDOT had an African-American for the east sector of TxDOT and for the west sector. These two guys basically designed that canyon. But when they went into business for themselves, all of a sudden, they couldn't get any contracts. And so you do well while you're performing in public sector, but all of a sudden you go into business for yourself, and you can't even get past the threshold.
That's the business side, and I appreciate that. Go wider. Clearly, your district, largely African-American, Latino. If you look across the nation, and again, kind of that last 10, 25 years, are we making progress on race relations? Are we doing better of what we say we want to do?
Again, it's always how you measure it. Yeah, we get along, but at the end of the day, I'm back at the pie. What does the pie look like? The only reason it's interesting what's going on now. Here we go with that intersection again. I tell people all the time, during certain takeover regimes, they did what is called burned books. One of my heroes, Frederick Douglass, says, education does not befit a man for slavery. And what's interesting to me as I'm watching what's going on now, not burning the books, but you're banning the books. I just gave my colleagues on the court a book by Metzel, Metzel. It's called Dying of Whiteness. And education has always been at the foundation. How during the institution of slavery, you don't want people to learn to read. And one of my favorite books, and I bought it today, it's called A Better Life for Our Children. It's by a guy by the name Julius Rosenwald. I use this book a lot when I go to schools and speak. And I said, I know you guys are not going to know who Julius Rosenwald was. I said, but he's Mr. Amazon from my era. If you wanted a house, you could get it from Sears, all boxed up and sent to you. I know you're a little young. You don't know what I'm talking about.
I must have missed that.
You missed that. But Julius Rosenwald was the CEO of Sears. And so he and Booker T. Washington got together. Around this country, we have what is known as the Rosenwald schools. And the only reason that he understood the whole education thing, he had a lot of respect for Booker T. Washington, is because he saw the appropriation. And I'm watching it in the state legislature now. I'm not even talking about what's going on the national, but in the state legislature now, because what we don't understand is what's going on. All of this, we can live next to one another and feel good. That means nothing, because at the end of the day, where it's $8.5 billion, what you're basically doing is that you're sucking the life out of public schools. the reason, and as I watch, whether it's Plano or Fort Worth, and I see the compression, the closing of schools, they don't get it. Charter schools primarily, in our community. What does that mean? People think that there is a better opportunity. They call them a public school, but there's a better opportunity. And what you're going to do is you're going to wind up in the public school sector with those with, unfortunately, little Johnny Junebug Peaches who can barely read because the good teachers are going to follow. They're not going to. And so this whole educational piece is driving me. And I don't care whether you call it charter, you can call it voucher, call it what you want to. At the end of the day, we've always been told that by the third grade, that's the mark on which people decide what is the prison complex going to resemble. Texas has one of the largest prison systems in the free world. And so when you look at that, let's
stress that for a second, though. Most people don't realize that projections of prison populations are based on third grade reading scores.
That's correct. And what's interesting, and I tell my colleagues on the court, if you go back and pull any of the tapes, they will tell you. I mean, even when you deal with this whole AI thing, a lot of times I'll filter stuff through AI because I tell whether it's in the health or just basically, most of us in this country are kind of operating on an 8th grade level. And AI will tell you, if you don't pair whatever it is, whatever message you're trying to message down to an 8th grade level, the comprehension is really not there. So there's not that large a step from the 3rd grade to the 8th grade if that is the average across this country. And Mayor, what concerns me is that we still don't put enough emphasis. I'm going to go back to Rosenwald just for a second on those 4,900 schools that he and Booker T built across this country. The appropriation for African-American kids was 20 cents. For Anglo kids, it was $1.
Okay, let's. I'm going to pivot it to, again, the county, and I have worked enough with you. You're an expert in jails. You're an expert in Parkland, the largest public hospital. We want to get to that, but you brought up education. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, and then I'm going to throw it back to Kyle on some of it.
Okay.
As you point out, in the Dallas Independent School District, 30% of kids, 30% at the 3rd grade level are reading at a 3rd grade level. So that means 70% are failing.
That's correct.
Numbers would also tell you that the probability of a child that's not at grade level at that point getting even an associate's degree, much less bachelor, is about 2%, 1 in 50. So it's kind of the unusual situation. Why in the world have we accepted for so long the public schools failing 70% of the students?
But Mayor, and I'm not a conspiracy, it's by design. It's back to what befits a man or woman for slavery. How do you, in 2024, across this country, hear about people banning books? The whole educational experience will tell you that sometimes when young people start at the 1st grade level, there's not that much difference. The difference becomes their experience, their exposure. I mean, my dad, while a Baptist minister, was a truck driver. He saw these things called computers. He was just amazed. And so, of course, I tried to go down that road of that Fortran and COBOL and computer geeks. They don't even know what I'm talking about now. But Fortran and COBOL, and he was just amazed. He said, "That's the future." He understood it. We did not have that exposure. When I look, and I talk to Dr. Podolsky often about this, I mean...
Who's the head of UT Southwestern?
UT Southwestern, CEO. By the way, I tell people, when we do the community health needs assessment, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, which has been around forever, but during the Obama administration, They made you not only do the assessment, but do the implementation. And what it basically says is if you live south of Interstate 30, not in Alabama, not in Louisiana, in Dallas, Texas, you live 23 years less than people who live north. And it's hard for people to fathom. They can't believe this. No, I can't believe that, Commissioner. Well, go read the Community Health Needs Assessment. It has everything to do with access to health care. I mean, 1948, UT Southwestern they had never been south of I-30 until Redbird reimagined. So now they're there, 140,000 square feet. Parkland with the C.V. Roman Medical Society. By the way, C.V. Roman, first African-American to practice medicine in Dallas. They're there. Guess what's getting ready to happen? Children's is getting ready to come to that campus. But when you look at UT Southwestern, what you find is, based on the access model, it outperforms every other campus except the central campus for UT Southwestern. What? We had Center for Disease Control, same 5 zip codes, chronic diseases. And so I say all of this, and I don't want to, it's all by design. It's by design, whether it's education, whether it's access. 40% of my district, by the way, is transportation deprived. So I've been around here since the old Dallas Transit.
The food deserts.
Food deserts.
Yeah, same thing with food desert. But I've been around here since the DTS days, again, before you were born. It's called Dallas Transit System. I was here. There's a book by Dr. Claude Anderson, and it's called Black Labor, White Wealth. It's an old book. And Dr. Anderson said that even the interstate, the freeway system, is designed to manage and or kill communities. Look what's going on now around the country, how they're even in South Dallas. What did they do? Dropped SM right to grade because it creates a whole different community.
Barriers. They become barriers. Yeah.
Yes, because what you
saw that downtown with Woodall Rogers for a long time.
Exactly. And because most people don't think anything about flyover. But I was here when J.B. Jackson, and he's not just I always tell people, not just a train station. When Kathleen Gillum, not just a school. I mean, I worked with these individuals. But when we had to fight TxDOT to talk about getting a Martin Luther King exit, that it was about that at that time it was called Forest Avenue, the Forest Avenue exit, because 45. Oh, wait, we call it 310 now, was a flyover. That's where you kill communities. And so you have to start to ask yourself, wow, if I can come to this, some intentionality here when it goes on, because as I said, when they decide they want to drop it to grade, the rest of I-30 now that it done dropped SM right to grade, now all of a sudden we're getting ready to talk about over around Fair Park, I-30, dropping the grade.
But I'm going to push you just a little bit on this question, because I think it's an important one.
Sure.
Over the last couple of decades, the minority participation on school districts has increased substantially. We've put more money into school districts, but it still seems to me that all of the folks involved, all of them, are still accepting of the fact that 30% of kids reading at grade level is okay. And in fact, if you look at public type of surveys and polling, you will get, depending on the community, anywhere from 90 to 95% of the people will think the school systems are doing just fine. Mm-hmm. I'm still searching for why we're accepting that, because we all know now it's an enormous cost. You identified some of the different pieces that come into healthcare, incarceration, et cetera, those sorts of things, entitlement programs. We all know the cost of someone that's not educated. But yet it seems to me I'm it seems to me it's the civil rights issue. Why haven't people stood up and said, I'm just not going to take it. These schools are going to have to perform for all the kids, and 30% isn't okay. I've seen it go on for too long, and you and I have had conversations in the past where, we move it from 30 to 32%, and all of a sudden we get excited that it was a 2%. Well, we still got 2/3 of the kids that are failing. It doesn't make any difference. Why do we accept it?
I'm going to continue to go back to intentionality. And unfortunately, Dallas is the second largest county in this state, 254 counties. Mm-hmm. We're the 9th largest county in the nation of 3,104 counties.
The area is going to be the 3rd largest metropolitan area in another couple of years.
Yeah, another 5 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But where I'm going with this is at that jail, you're spending $18 million every month, not a year. $18 million every month. Has nothing to do with Parkland is spending another $5 million because, unfortunately, those individuals are the sickest of the sick. And while we see that, we talk about, crime rate is going down, at the end of the day, we still don't connect the dots. We still don't connect the dots in terms of this reading. I promise you, we have at least 40 programs up in there. Everybody from Dallas College on back. Is that the area to talk about where we begin to try to educate people? No, the schools are. And even though this whole legislative Senate Bill 2, giving the teachers a little bit more money and beginning teachers $64,000, we're just not there. That we still have not placed the emphasis on education. And when you begin to see this whole dismantling from a psychologically of the Department of Education, which 99% of people know what the Department of Education even did. Civil rights, monitoring, make sure, ARDs, those individuals who are challenged, have certain access to public schools. It should be our bedrock, but it's not there. But when the governor can get a $6 million check to take out charter schools, take out legislators who say, look, this drain is killing public schools. If you think it's bad now, they do all this OMB projection at the national level, but the legislative budget board, when they talk about the cost associated with the free voucher program, with all that's going on, and the drain on schools, I'm trying to figure out why people like Fort Worth ISD, Plano, all these other schools that are closing the school, why they don't understand. They've got the growth spur, so why are they having
Fort Worth actually performs worse than Dallas Independent?
Oh, I got it. Oh, I know, I got it. But the schools are not closing because they perform. They're closing primarily because there's a diversion. You're not having any less kids. Where are they going? And so they're going either into charter or private schools, and of course, private now will have access. And so again, at the end of the day, it's still going to be about the educational piece. I understand everybody does. I don't need everybody to be a surgeon. I need somebody to know how to, as they say, set the forms and pour the concrete and tie the steel. I get that. I definitely want somebody who knows how to get in there and do the plumb work. And I get that. And most of those individuals make a very, very good living.
I'm going to have you come down next week. We've got a graduating class for the construction training out of South Dallas that we've got. You would love to see those folks. We could spend a lot of time on education. One of the challenges of education now that becomes even more difficult is the demographics have changed.
Yes.
And we're actually going to see a reduction in the number of students, especially in urban areas. But let's pivot to criminal justice.
Well, so before we get there, I want to take you to Fair Park.
Okay.
I want to talk to you about Watermark, South Dallas, that's entered the Fair Park neighborhood at the old Pearl C. Anderson High School. Give me your thoughts on, obviously, you've got a neighborhood that has been challenged for many decades, and now you've got a resource. I've gone there the last 2 years, been on the ground, tried to work in the community, gotten to know the neighbors and all of the people down there as best I can. Talk to me about how do we know that there's an issue in our community. We know that we can't tie the relations as close as we want. How can a church be a place for opportunity to do that? Because it's got a lot of space. There's, I think, 254,000 square feet at this old high school. How could that be an opportunity to grow into the neighborhood?
You can't just appear in the neighborhood and say, trust me.
Yep.
It doesn't work. And probably from the church side of the aisle, they're suspect of even churches that have been in the community.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So you come and you got space. Is there a housing project associated with Watermark? Housing is an issue. Is there, what components are there? And don't get me wrong, this is the same challenge I do with African-American churches. You come and you build a nice edifice and you've got all the space in the world. And then you expand in a building program. Okay, how does that really benefit the community? Because a lot of people who look like me drive in from wherever, come in, worship, because that's a cultural deal for me. They come in, they worship, and then they exit.
Well, and I think that's part of the challenge with the church, frankly.
Sure.
You've got 254,000 square feet. You've got a mobile health clinic that Watermark has placed down there. And I know that they've been challenged on the rezoning efforts to try and get, call it a market or greater healthcare services expanded into the building. But that's been a challenge with the city. But I know that the church it's wanting to be there. It's wanting to be there for the long haul.
But who are you collaborating with? Who are you collaborating with, Paul? Are you collaborating with the FQHCs, federally qualified health centers? I'm just now getting Parkland.
Yeah.
A $3.5 billion. Look, I need you to collaborate with the FQHCs that are in my community. You can't service all of the individuals in the community. So who are you collaborating with? I'm just now stopping them from what we call ghosting my constituents who are coming out of FQHCs, going into Parkland for specialty care, and then getting lost in the system. As we talk about this administration and the funding cuts, Dallas County, $275 million worth of grants. The majority of those grants are health grants. But as I challenge Dr. Wong in court each and every time, scale this. Where are they? I just talked about the 5 CDC chronic zip codes. You're right in the middle of it. But that doesn't mean anything. How are you collaborating? What's your collaboration?
So let's talk about Parkland.
Okay.
So Parkland's obviously got a long history. You got a long history with Parkland in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Good, bad, or indifferent.
Exactly.
So talk to me about, have you seen progress? Talk to me about what you see as the future of public health in Dallas County.
I've seen progress. Keep in mind, and again, I'm going to go back to Kathleen Joy Gillum and the fact that I wish I could say that I was that brilliant, but it came out of Harlem. And it was this ring of clinics in Dallas called COPCs, Community-Oriented Primary Care Clinics. And my colleagues, and may rest in peace, Jim Jackson and all told me, said, okay, you want to start a clinic? Because again, 40 years ago, 41, I was having the same transportation issues with DART. Okay? Parkland's over here. Well, my people are here. How do they get there? Oh, by the way, you can catch a bus. It only takes you 4 hours to get across town. It's going to take you half a day on public transit. And most people don't think about that. So one of the things we did is Kathleen and I got together, and over on Overton Road, she gave me a $1 for the year interlocal agreement for a piece of land. So I went back to my colleagues. I said, okay, I got the land. Let's build the clinic. And so we built Blewett Flowers, named after Dr. R.B. Blewett, first black doctor in Dallas with a see-through machine, X-ray, and the Dr. W.J. Flowers, who had a sanitarium on Thomas and Hall. Let me tell you something. Dallas has a rich history. And of course, I've evidenced that in my South Dallas Government Center with terms of telling that history. But it's not enough to tell the history. How do you take and strategically deal with that history? But anyway, Blewett Flowers is there. Now, we've got a ring of COPCs around the country and around the county, and we've got people waiting for them. What they have shown is, and again, I had to wrestle with black physicians to get Parkland in the community. They're going to take our patients. No, you're not servicing those patients. That's a different patient. And so as a result, now there's a comfort level. Again, Blewett Flowers, C.V. Roman, Elam Clinic, Irving Clinic, out in North Dallas. And now they're starting, again, to collaborate with Dallas College on the campuses. But there's still a lot of sectors that are not serviced. And Dr. King talked about, of all of the inequities in the world, no inequity is more unjust than healthcare. And because, and that's straight out of King. My concern is that you can come, and as Governor Mark White, which again, you're not going to know who that is, you're a little young, but he used to be a governor of Texas, and he used to tell me, said, Commissioner, you can build the most beautiful shopping center in the world. And he was telling me about being a commissioner. He said, but if you have no way to get there, it'll die. That's what happened with Redbird. Redbird, and now reimagined. The only reason it's reimagined is because you now have access.
The roads, the infrastructure.
The infrastructure, the tentacles are going in there. And so access is everything.
It's really the key to the system is because it's a combination of both access and availability. And you can have access from a funding standpoint, which we saw through the ACA, but if you don't have the availability of that healthcare, it doesn't work. So step back for just a second before
Sure.
we pivot out of this. How would you like to see kind of the national healthcare system, the American healthcare system? How should it change to try to address some of the issues that you just talked about?
Well, for all of your listeners who are going to say, there he goes with that socialist stuff, is that, it's to all of our benefit. It's to all of our benefit to have, because we need a universal health care system. I can't even begin to tell you. I watch this gamesmanship in Big Pharma with these meds. And it's interesting. Dr. Josh Green? He's the governor of Hawaii. And he talked about it. He said, it's interesting. We don't mind talking about taking 13 million people off of Medicare. We don't talk about
Medicaid.
Medicaid. The whole access to Obamacare is going to be constrained. He goes through all of that. But he said, you know what? What's interesting with Big Pharma? He said, I don't see them messing with Viagra and Cialis and all of those programs. And he said it kind of tongue in cheek, but he was very serious. Why are we talking about, insulin? Why are we talking about things that are basic life issues. I mean, not recreational, and that's what he was alluding to, but life issues. And Mayor, until we really see ourselves, and I know you saw the Osage community, the Flower Moon piece. Until we see ourselves, it's a different cut for me in terms of people who don't have access, but for the grace of God, we're going to continue to have issues. This country still does not see that. It's I'm back to Metzel, Dying of Whiteness. And when you read the book, what you're going to find is he basically said they did this survey, and this guy basically needed the same access to services that this African-American minority population needed. And his position was he didn't need it. He was dying of the same problems in terms of access. But rather than to have somebody who looked like me get it, he would rather die. And it's a great book, a great read. I don't think we still understand that. And as I said, as a commissioner for 41 years, as going toward that, I'm at 75 and going, I got to wake up every morning and say, you're a beneficiary of all these people. Now, what are you giving back every day?
Yeah.
What are you giving back? And I don't think we still understand that. We still don't understand that, man. I don't think we understand that in a way that at the end of the day, it's going to come back on us. I mean, we're taking probably some of the most fertile minds, of the real opportunities, and I think we're quashing it.
Education, healthcare, criminal justice. You run a big jail. You're probably as knowledgeable in jail systems as anybody in this nation. You've seen the Dallas County jail system go from under federal control and a whole host of issues to out of that control, more independence. You've seen a lot of different pieces of the criminal justice system. Largest number proportionally incarceration in any country in the world. Thoughts on criminal justice?
I used to say, and I say this publicly in court, I used to say the system will be vindicated when African Americans become police officers, when African Americans become judges, when African Americans become lawyers, we're going to see a vindication of the system.
That's happened.
That has happened. We have not seen a vindication of the system. And now I'm going to go, I'm subscribed to the oppressed, take on the ways of the oppressor. I find myself challenging the same people every day. And I don't care whether I'm speaking to Black Police Officers Association or I'm speaking to Black judges from my position because of the separation of powers, the judiciary, the administrative, the legislative. And so I have no real control over them. The state law says I've got to provide facilities.
Yep.
And you're the funder.
The money.
That's it.
You're the money. Yep.
That's it. But I have no control. So do I manage by embarrassment? And I do, best I can. Because I'm embarrassed, first of all. And I may not be able to embarrass you, but I'm going to keep coming. Because I'm at work every day. In 41 years, I've missed 90 days of work. That's everything. 3 surgeries, that's everything. 90 days. I come to work every day. The day I don't want to do this, then I need to leave. So I dare you. You're the judge. You even control the district attorney. who, in my opinion, is extremely reasonable and understands. And so I guess I'm a little frustrated because I've said all my life, this is the pinnacle. This is where I need to get to. And I can't see police officers, regardless of what they're doing, all of a sudden you're joining in and doing what was historically you complained about. It's.
No, you're right. In the Memphis situation that we've just seen, that was a situation we've seen it. You saw in the George Floyd situation.
And we're coming
that officer had 18 different citations. My argument is he should never have been an officer.
Exactly.
That's part of the problem in situations like that. With that said, we have tried some new things lately. There are municipalities and counties across the country that have adopted a defund the police type of approach. There are other counties, other municipalities that have adopted a very progressive approach to cash bail, of eliminating cash bail. Then we've seen a number of different prosecutors have said on what they view as smaller infractions, thefts even up to as large as $1,000, we're not going to prosecute those anymore. What's your thought on those? Have they worked? Are we going it the wrong way? Where should we be going?
You at the end of the day, on my campaign truck, it says, our man downtown. And then it says, our address happens to be Elm Street, 500 Elm Street. Before it was 500 Elm, it was 411 Elm. And so I have a piece on my truck that says, Nightmare on Elm Street. But then through the nightmare, I have a circle. And across the circle, it says management. And I say, I just manage. And they think it's a nightmare. At the end of the day, you've got to manage. We got to manage our way out of this. And it's going to take all the boots on the ground and the sincerity. And I tell people all the time, if you don't want to do this, I understand. They will tell you, I onboard all of the employees every Monday. Been doing it since pre-COVID. I onboard them. And I basically tell them my story, how long I've been there. Mm-hmm. And usually I've been there longer than, kind of like, our host here, longer than they are old. But my point is, I said, my constituents and the voters expect one thing. They expect a full 40 hours because that's what they're paying you for. And then the person next to you, your associate, expects 40 hours. Me, I signed on. If I'm at the service station, they expect me to respond. If I'm in the grocery store, they expect me to respond. If I'm at church, they expect me to respond. And I need to respond. Otherwise, I need to go do something else. And so when I say all of that, you got to have the compassion to do this, but you got to manage your way out of this. And so as a result, I chair jail sanitation, which is a compliance issue with the Texas Commission on Jail standards. There's a standard, 1 to 48. One detention officer for every 48 people in custody, okay? The issue becomes, if I'm authorized for 7,100, a female cannot be in sight nor sound of a male. So if I got 989 females at midnight, I've got an issue because I got so much space. I got so many beds. So if I only have 7,100 beds, I've got to manage it. Texas Commission on Jail Standards says I've got a classification system. Maximum can be with medium. Maximum can't be with minimum. So if I got all these minimum charges over here, still taking up space, I've got to manage that. I don't care whether it's a prostitute or that. I get it, and I don't even want to get into the part to talk about what percentage of the jail is mental health. I've got 400 individuals that should have been with the state that's costing local taxpayers $14 million every year.
Yeah, jails have become de facto mental health institutions.
But the issue that they don't tell you is that once they age out, and it's one thing of that 400 for the majority of them to be a felony, but when they age out on a Class A or Class B, up to 180, 360 days, I've got to turn them loose. Now, I happen to chair behavioral health, which I try to do a handoff in terms of agencies, again, partners, collaboration in the community. The law says I turn them loose. That's it. They've done their time.
Let them go.
Let them go. I'm going to see them again.
Right.
So now I've got to try to manage behavioral health in a way that I'm going to do a handoff. I'm back to this whole collaboration. And there's a lot of stakeholders out there, but somebody's got to manage it. There's that word again. Collaborate, manage. Whether it's federal qualified health centers, FQHCs, whether it's North Texas Behavioral Health, management. We've got to collaborate. Ain't no silos. It drives me crazy. 2008, we went to the state cite and release. The reason I had such an issue with it is that all the cite and release was happening in the southern sector because that's where you were picking up people. Now, are you telling people, and I'm, nothing against SMU and University Park, but so are you telling me that 2 ounces of marijuana, it's the difference between whether it's marijuana or paraphernalia. Take the fine and go on down the line. But in here, South, our people getting picked up. You have the option to cite them and release them, but you're picking them up and you're bringing them in. I only have 7,100 beds. My midnight count is 6,900. I'm already over capacity based on a classification system. I've got all of these issues I'm trying to juggle and manage. And most of my female population, unfortunately, have substance abuse issues. So it ain't like I can put a monitor on them, let them go. And I tell people all the time, we talk about custody is designed for males, but and the moment a female enters into it, throws off all the numbers. But females really impact the community in a way that males can't even fathom.
Say a little bit more about that.
Well, the fact of the matter is that we know what the offenses are, and usually with substance abuse, it usually becomes pretty aggravated. But when you take a female, for the most part, you're taking a mother, you're taking a family, you're impacting it in ways that you cannot
impacting other people. Pull into it. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
And so a lot of the ARP money, the American Rescue Plan money, we took and we did some relations with an agency that RBCA, the Regional Black Contractor, CDC. Mm-hmm. We bought some units and we put them in a program similar to yours, skill sets, acquisition skill sets, and then place them on jobs. But housing is the issue. If you got a record, they don't really want you, in the unit. So now you've got a unit, got 1 year to try to transition. I could purchase the unit with ARP money, but I couldn't furnish it. So now here I come with my churches. It costs me $1,500 usually to furnish a unit. It drives me nuts. What do churches really want to help? And so here we are. I've got 71 units. These people are just now trying to get on their feet.
Transition out.
Yes. Yeah. And a number of them were sleeping on the floor because, they didn't have a bed. They didn't have, the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this unit over here, you can take all of your programming. You got your Alcoholic Anonymous, you got your Narcotic Anonymous, you got everything. It's programmed in. And you got 1 year to help. And I'm going to tell you, when those individuals get to making a livable wage, they start bringing their families in. It's a whole different concept. You have to be there to see it, but most people don't. They were incarcerated. I had to wrestle with my community about purchasing the unit in my community. What the hell do you expect me to buy? You expect me to come into North Dallas and put it in the community? I put it where they get access and they're able to understand that this is a baby step transition.
Associate.
Sure.
But on some of these things, do they work? I mean, let's take the one, and you've seen it in a number of communities where they said, okay, and we saw it here in Dallas County. We're not going to prosecute thefts of up to $1,000. But then other communities that went down that road have pulled back, saying people got pretty smart at understanding how do I get to $999 as opposed to $1,000.
Well, yeah, I mean,
what's your thought on that?
But it's management. I mean, when you're going in, I mean, I don't know.
So then you're saying it's not a philosophy; it is a resource question. It's just having the resources to be able to do the right thing and prosecute those individuals, whatever the outcome might be. But it's a resource question because some people put it forward as it's a philosophy.
Yeah.
It's okay to steal $999, but it's not okay to steal $1,000. You're really positioned it as a resource issue in a lot of different ways that we just don't have the resources to deal with those. Is that fair?
That's fair, but you still got to try to manage it. You cannot, I mean, I know burglary of a vehicle doesn't rise to love, but hey, if it's my vehicle, I got a whole different problem.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to, I'll tell folks an interesting story because when I was mayor, you and I worked on an issue where all of a sudden we saw burglaries in Dallas City, which clearly falls in Dallas County, saw them bump up. You came up with a pretty creative idea. It was to do a burglary court where it was only dealing with burglars because as you pointed out, and I was very impressed with kind of the cultural understanding, a lot of judges love doing murder trials. They don't like doing burglary trials. And a burglar comes in and says, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. So they go, well, 3 months later, they're back in, but it's another judge, so I can run the same story.
Right.
If they run it to the same judge, that story's probably not going to take flight.
Exactly.
You've been pretty creative on some of those. What other creative kind of options like that? Because I thought that was a great approach to dealing with a specific problem.
Mayor, there's a number of creative ways that we've got to manage this. I tell people all the time, again, authorized for 7,100. One of the things we did in Dallas County 12 years ago when we built the Susan B. Case Tower, that's on the south side of the jail complex, Starrett complex. That pod, we had to begin to recruit new detention officers. Because if you're my age and you historically been putting them behind bars and locking them down, you weren't going to go and sit inside of a pod with 64 inmates. Now, our ratios, it made our ratios better than all, but what we use that pod is a behavioral pod. If your behavior met certain deals, then you could get in this pod with a few more amenities, if you will. But I got an officer sitting inside of that pod monitoring. So where you don't have 2 or 3 in a cell, I now got 64 in a pod and it being managed. Now, granted, census began to do some compression, but once you were exited from that pod, you saw the difference. We also had to do some other creations in the. It just takes us being as creative as we possibly can. Because again, the classification system, I don't have anything to say about it. Texas Commission on Jail Standards holds us to a standard. And what I'm proud of in Dallas is that we have not exported any of our housing. Harris County.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they're just having to pull back because they were in Louisiana, other places, yeah.
Louisiana, Mississippi, $50 million addition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he talks about the whole defunding deal. What that basically means is that once that sheriff's budget is set, you don't get a chance to drop below it. Well, I just told you $18 million a month.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's just, and then, as I said, $5 million on top of that was Parkland. And so if you're a taxpayer in Dallas County, that's $23 million every month. You do, at some point in time, and it costs $88 a day to house someone. $88. We serve 22,000 calorically balanced meals every day, notwithstanding what goes on in our infirmary, where renal failure, dialysis, diabetes, those are specialty meals. We've got to do that every day, 7 days a week, and we're audited. And so when you look at all that's going on, we've got to be able to incentivize and get creative in a way that people say, you know what? And I guess what really bothers me is the juvenile population. We've got to come up with different ways of being able to deal with this. You can't lock your way out of it. You cannot lock your way out of it. And the problem is resources. He talked about resources a few minutes ago. It's rough being a detention officer. Quiet as kept, the state closed a couple of prisons because they couldn't get enough resources. So what does that do? That backs them up into our system. So it presses on us. They've got 45 days to pick them up. And of course, when I became a commissioner 30-something years ago, we sued the state because now they're adjudicated. They're supposed to be in your system. And so now we came to a compromise, 45 days. They got 45 days to come and to pick them up. We've created some of this ourselves.
So talk to me about, it's a resource issue, but also take me back to the community. How do we make progress in not even allowing people to be in the jails? Like, where do we go, community, neighborhood by neighborhood, to change some of the systemic issues that have caused some of this?
If you were to bring a guy, talk about intersection, I love it. On my behavioral health team is a guy by the name of Doug Denton. And he has a program called Homeward Bound. And before he is at his present location, he was in the Bishop Arts District and got priced out. He's now on University Hills. Again, I had to arm wrestle with the community. Like, why are you bringing in it? These are people. It's part of our diversion program. But what I love about Doug is that he went and got a grant, met with all the merchants in the community. Most of those individuals have mental health challenges, damn sure got substance abuse challenges. As a result, he tells all the vendors, he said, don't call the police, call us. And it has worked in ways that nobody's talking about, and that's okay.
Why? If it's working, why aren't we talking?
Yeah, why can't and do more of it?
Well, because that's not what people really want to see. It, even though it's taking pressure off the police department,
Sure.
the community is ecstatic about it. And Doug is working. His number. He reports his numbers to my not only to the behavioral health leadership team, but again, he's going after more funding because he now sends a team to go and get that individual, bring him into Homeward Bound. Parkland is there at Homeward Bound. Social workers, community health workers. And so you got a program. We're working with DART same way in terms of getting people. You can't force them, but you get a whole different concept. You just got to get management. You got to get creative. You got to collaborate. You can't do this stuff in silos. And when the community has a good comfort level that you are there for the right reasons, they'll work with you.
Yeah, and I think going back to our earlier conversation on Watermark South, I think that's been part of the chasm church is trying to cross. It's hard.
It's a disconnect.
Yeah.
It's a disconnect until you connect with the community in a way. Where is your closest FQHC? I know where the closest. Watermark is right here. Well, I just built Hatcher Street Station. Parkland's right there. Yeah. Y'all are y'all not even a mile apart. Golly, I spent almost $60 million.
How do we get together?
That's my point. But where has been the outreach?
Sure.
Where has been the outreach?
Right.
Has Watermark reached out and says, hey, how can we help Parkland? Do you realize that Hatcher Street Station opens on some Sundays? Most people don't realize that. Most people say, well, golly, they're open on Sunday. Well, the community, they can't get there sometime during the week.
Sure.
So has it made a difference? Sure. That's the kind of collaboration. And again, I've had to arm wrestle with Parkland about these FQHCs. Dadgummit, you can't service everybody. And so I've got 10 FQHCs, federally qualified health centers. Martin Luther King, Foremost in Bog Springs, Los Barrios in West Dallas. I've got, East Dallas. And then, of course, they made applications to go into places like DeSoto and Lancaster. And so I've got to have collaboration. And so during the last budget session, I held up Parkland's budget. I said, nope, we're all going to come to the table. And so now, less than a year later, it's a whole different model. They're reporting every quarter. I know what's going on. They're not ghosting people into their system. FQHCs are happier. Parkland's happier. What? Collaboration, management. They're just meager. There's just so many resources. That's it. How are we going to manage it?
So, what do you like doing when you're not totally engaged in questions of jails and hospitals and things like that?
If I wake up, Mayor, I'm happy. Feel just enough pain to know I'm still alive.
Okay.
And I'm okay. Now, really and truly, I like dealing with those old raggedy cars of mine, but I don't have time a lot of time, And so, that's basically, my thing is 7 days a week. The day I don't want to do this, before I go to church, sometime on Sunday morning, they will tell you, he's in the jail. Every holiday, I'm in either adult or the juvenile system. They see me. 50% of my employees, 6,500, have to work. Over 50% have to work 24/7. They need to see me as well.
You got to be a leader.
Yeah. They need to see me at working. I know during the picket time.
I think the word you use is warrior.
Yeah. But they need to see that. They will tell you at midnight, I'll show up. I'll appear. They will tell you Sunday mornings, like I said, for go to church. They will tell you doing detail. I'll pop up in different details. That's just an imperative. They've got to feel like you care. Those chairs are all broken down. When last time we about to purchase some chairs? I need to talk purchase.
Walking around.
Yeah. You cannot expect.
After 41 years,
Mhm.
what do you think your biggest accomplishments have been? And what do you think you failed in or has come up short from where you would want to be at this point, 41 years into a service career?
I've accomplished everything and I've accomplished nothing. You can't expect what you don't inspect. It's the reason I'm on the ground. And again, I'm proud of the healthcare access piece. I'm proud of a number of things, but there's so many more things I need to do. Zan Holmes used to tell the story about the farmer and the little boy. And he said the farmer needed some assistance. And he advertised, I need help on the farm, come. And they had a number of applicants. And he said, this little boy came. And the little boy said, he said, well, what are your qualifications? And the little boy said, I sleep well on a windy night. The farmer said, okay, that's all well and good. He said, but what are your qualifications? He said, I sleep well on a windy night. And this went on for about 2 or 3 days. And the farmer said there was something about that little boy that was engaging. And he said, he decided to go with it. And Zan tells the story that there came a great storm. And the farmer began to call out, yell for the little boy. And he couldn't find him. And he just kept up. And so after a while, he said, I knew I shouldn't have hired him. And so the farmer went to put up his livestock. And his livestock was put up. And he went to check on the hay, feeds, and all. And it was in the barn. And everything he went to check on was already taken care of. And then he remembered the little boy said, I sleep well on a windy night. Mayor, that's my only objective. I'm just trying to sleep well.
I don't know of anybody in North Texas, especially elected officials, that elicits more emotions, both positive and negative.
Oh yeah, hey, it's got to be about. It's called yin yang and come out in the arts.
Well, we really appreciate you being with us.
No problem. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Okay,
great seeing you,
Commissioner. Okay. Thank you so much.